One of the problems is lack of outsiders coming into government departments. The department level, there is an enormous problem. So government departments in Hong Kong have been very static. They generally have almost never recruited at the senior level from outside the department.
Now, switching to a more topical topic, the pandemic. How is open data used in Hong Kong and around the world in fighting the pandemic, particularly compared to Taiwan?
Well, Taiwan has handled the pandemic quite well, so some of these issues haven't become, I think, quite as topical as they are in Hong Kong, or if we consider US or Europe. So one of the key issues with an infectious disease, of course, is knowing where people are, so you know who has been a close contact. Because knowing exactly where people are at every time can be quite sensitive data. So the question is how to do this in a safe way. Now, in Hong Kong, one of the crucial issues, if you like, is which building were you in? So the government has done QR codes for many buildings. So I didn't actually see whether there was a QR code at the entrance to this building.
No.
No.
No, I don't think so.
Right. So I think quite a lot of commercial buildings haven't done this, which is maybe a weakness. So I think the government is trying to encourage that. So if you've got the government app, you can scan the QR code, and at least you remember then which buildings you went to visit. Because otherwise, if you get to Alan my age, maybe you don't always remember everywhere you went. So what's the issue? So the issue is how to do this in a safe way without infringing on privacy. But in fact, I think that whole process has already highlighted one weakness in the Hong Kong data system. So this is really about spatial data, meaning where you are. So the spatial can be looked at several different levels. The first level is the whole of Hong Kong. So knowing that somebody else was infected in Hong Kong is not very helpful because there are 7 million of us. The next level is district. Well, again, districts have lots of people, right? They've got maybe 500,000 people, so that's not very helpful. Then we come down to constituency. So there are about, nearly 500 constituencies. So we're talking about 115,000 people? I think 15,000 people. So that's getting to be a little bit more helpful, but then we come to the level below, which is building, right? So the issue with buildings is Hong Kong doesn't actually have a zip code or hasn't had openly a building identification, a unique identification for buildings. So that actually can lead to difficulties. So if I go to the hospital and the hospital says, what's your address? I might write my address down in one way. Somebody else from the same building might go and write down the building address in a different way. So does the hospital know that we both came from the same building? So I know the government has been working on building IDs, but this is one area where Hong Kong has been behind. So if you go to the US or the UK or most European countries, they have zip codes which are usually granular down to building level. So if you know your zip code, you can check the zip code to see whether someone else was infected in the same zip code. So those are the sorts of things where I think a crisis like the virus has forced the government to try and work out how to solve. So my understanding, I haven't seen a public statement, but I believe they are working towards this because it links back to address. Essentially, how do you, all the different ways that people might write an address down in English or in Chinese, how do we make sure if they're referring to the same building? And of course, even within building, you've got the same details, the floor and the unit number. So the mail system in Hong Kong, generally the post office does a great job of usually finding the right person. But because they have been very efficient, we haven't developed a good zip code or a building ID. I mean, they're not quite the same thing, but they are linked in the sense that we need to be able to match addresses.
So the low adoption rate of this identification thing is not just a lack of trust of government, it's a systemic problem.
It's a systemic problem where we've muddled along. the system worked well enough that people, I believe, didn't see it was a priority, and different government departments didn't even define a building in quite the same way and had difficulties matching their own data. So it's not just a matter of government sharing data with us, the public, even the government sharing data with themselves was sometimes problematic.